So, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. I am Vasant, Marketing Manager at Wepsol, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar, What the Gamecraft Verdict Teaches Business About GST Risk. So, at Wepsol, we help organizations simplify business and technology challenges through consulting, digital transformation, and managed IT services, along with business solutions. We are also excited to introduce FlowTax, our tax compliance platform that enables business to file GST returns, generate e-way bills, create e-invoices, and manage IMS from a single platform. So our journey begins in 1998 as a part of Wepsol domestic IT businesses. In 1991, we partnered with Epson to establish our first manufacturing facility in Mysore. In 2000, we became an independent employee-owned company, followed by the launch of our print and served managed printing services in 2002, and the opening of our second manufacturing facility in Bagdi, Himachal Pradesh in 2005. In 2011, Wepsol Limited was listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange. We expanded into digital transformation with Web Digital in 2007, and in 2020 unified our businesses unit under one organization. Today at Wepsol, we continue to help business improve productivity, strengthen relationships, and accelerate digital transformations. So our Fluid Workshoots brings together four integrated solutions. One is Fluid Pro, which is managed IT services. The second one is Fluid Print, print management. Third one is Fluid Map, IT asset management. And the fourth one is Fluid Trail, workflow automation and document management. Together, they help organization build smarter and more effective places. With that, I thank once again for joining us. Now I will hand it over the session to Manoj Mogar, who will be your host for today's webinar. Over to you, Manoj.
Hi everybody. Today's webinar is going to be what the Gameskraft verdict teaches businesses about GST risk, and I want to introduce you to our uh, speaker, Mr. Akella sir, specialized in indirect taxes. Is also proficient with GST requirement, and therefore is able to provide us unique insights into today's topic of what the Gamescraft verdict teaches business about GST risk, and what the relevant to GST with Gamescraft verdict. So my name is Manoj Moger. I am your GST spoke today, and I'm very excited to be hosting this webinar. So I hope you enjoy this webinar. So over to you, Akela sir.
So I'm an advocate, and some of the participants who are repeat participants know me. And today's topic is on the Supreme Court, recent Supreme Court decision in the matter of Gamescraft, and what is its impact on the GST? Why we should be knowing it? This is the topic. But before venturing into the topic, my request to all the participants is that at the end of the session, please let us know whether the topic that we have discussed is useful at your end in your businesses or not. That will help us to fine tune our future webinars also, and also to upgrade ourselves to meet your requirements. Okay, and today's agenda, what we are going to cover, what is the background of this case, what are the arguments made, and what is the decision that is given, and what is its impact, and what will be the next course of action. Of course, after that, it is going to be the Q&A. So if you have got any questions, my request is that please post your queries in the Q&A box so that at the end of the session, we can take it up. But don't post your queries in the chat box so that it will be easy for us to address the questions immediately after the session. Next slide, please. Yeah. So these online gaming companies operate as intermediaries by facilitating a platform for the players to play the games hosted by them. For this activity, they charge a certain platform or entry fee. For those who are not very much familiar with what is exactly the issue that is being dealt by the Supreme Court, that you know it, that there are games which are hosted online also by some of the companies like Rummy and other things, wherein that you being a player, you can participate by registering yourself, that you will be sharing your information, whatever is required by the portal for you to get registered. And after that, that you can participate in the game. But you are not alone, or you are not playing with somebody unknown, that there will be other players also. So among you, the game will be hosted by the platform. So the platform is predominantly acting as an intermediary, because the entire game is happening between the players, and the platform is providing an opportunity for you to play with others. So that's why they felt that they are intermediaries, and that's how it happens. And in some of the cases, what happens, it is not just playing and winning, but there are some stakes also involved. So people will be putting up some kind of a stake while participating in the game, and all the players will be pulling up their stakes, and the platform will hold this money. And after the game gets over, whosoever is the winner, he will be getting the prize money out of this pool. So, what is that the platform is going to gain? The platform is going to deduct some amount of the pool money that each player is going to contribute as towards their charges. They may call it as a platform fee or entry fee or whatever may be. So, that is the earning for the platform. And whatever is the major chunk of it will be in the prize pool money, which will be given to the winner. Sometimes it so happens that even the runners and others also may get some kind of an amount. So it is all decided prior to the start of the game. So they will be telling you that who gets how much. So depending on that, the winners will be getting the share out of the game. So there may be a case that the players may place bet on the possible outcome of the game being played, and the game can be skill based or chance based. What is skill based or chance based? Chance based is kind of a game wherein that you throw dice. You do not know what is going to be the outcome. So a dice will be having six sides to it. 1 to 6 numbers will be there. So when you throw a die, then out of the six numbers, that anything may be drawn. So it is purely a chance based, where because that you are a skillful player, that every time when you throw the die, that you can't come out with six only on the top, right? So there is no skill involved in it. But whereas there are some games wherein that your skill matters a lot. So when the other player is like a rummy, so when you are playing with somebody else, then the opponent will be drawing one particular card. So progressed so far that you can gauge that what kind of cards the other player is holding, and by which card if you play, that you are likely to succeed. So this comes with a bit of skill, like chess. See, when you play chess online with somebody, the opponent is going to make a move, one pawn or something that he is going to move. So, in order to ascertain the nature of the game, whether skill based or chance based, the courts have resorted to the predominance test. So, whenever that there is a dispute about the taxation of these games and all, the matters in the past have went up to the courts, and the courts used to take a decision first, that depending on the predominance test. What is predominance test? What is the most probable way in which the game is getting played? Is it purely based on chance, or that there is any kind of a skill involved in it? And if it is a predominantly skill based, then the game is construed as a skill based game. And if it is purely out of a chance, then it is a chance based game. So depending on that, the courts use it to give their rulings. So they have resorted to the predominance test. When in the other slides, subsequent slides, we are going to discuss more about this. And states have competence to legislate over the games of chance, but not on the games of skill, by virtue of entry 34 of the list 2 of the Constitution of India. You are very well aware that Constitution of India has got three lists. List one is central list, where the subjects mentioned there in that list are purely governed by the central government. List 2 is a state list where the subjects are governed by the state government, and list 3 is a concurrent list wherein both the center as well as the state can govern, but if the central government has already ruled on any particular topic, then the state has to follow. So there is a decorum which is mentioned in the Constitution of India. As per that, it has to. So under list 2 of the Constitution of India, at entry number 34, that the states have competence to legislate over the games of chance. But the games of skills are out of the purview of the state legislation. That is one other dispute that is also pending before the court. So the DGCA in Karnataka has taken up this issue against Gameskraft by demanding 21,000 crores of rupees on the as a GST for against Gameskraft. That is the crux of the dispute which has started off initially. So the matter went up to without adjudicating. The Gamescraft has approached the High Court of Karnataka saying that this levy is unconstitutional for the reason that, see, in a game, I'm giving an illustration which I may be often repeating during the presentation, that in a game where there are 4 players, each of them have paid 100 rupees to the gaming platform to participate in the game. So the game will be throwing up only one winner at the end of it. So the winner is going to get 90% of the prize pool money, because 10% is going to be the platform fee. So what happens? Each player will be contributing 100 rupees as his share. 10 rupees will be retained by the gaming company as the participation fee. 90 rupees from each player, that amounts to 360 rupees in total, will be in the prize pool account, and the winner at the end of the game is going to get 360 rupees as his winning amount. So the gaming companies, in their understanding, because in the past that they have discharged the service tax on the gaming income also. So hence, in continuation to that kind of an understanding, even after the introduction of the GST way back in on 1st of July 2017, they discharged the tax on the 10 rupees which they have collected. 10% of the participation money, whatever the each player has played as their consideration, and on that 10%, that they have discharged the tax at 18%, which was the tax rate at that point of time. So 18 rupees on 10 rupees income comes to 1 rupee 80 paise. So for each player, they have deducted a tax of 1 rupee 80 paise, which they have remitted to the government. But the DGCA's argument in the show cause notice is that the entire 100 rupees should be subjected to tax, and the gaming company is supposed to pay 18 rupees of tax. So the Karnataka High Court has said that this online rummy is a game of skill, hence it cannot be legislated the way that the DGCA is proposing, and it is out of the purview of the GST. And only on 10 rupees, whatever the tax, that is payable. That's how the Karnataka High Court has summed up the case. So the revenue is not satisfied with the outcome at Karnataka High Court, and they have put the matter in a special leave petition before the Supreme Court. Taking cue from this decision, across the country, several show cause notices were issued to different gaming platforms, and all of these were combined, and collectively, the Supreme Court has conducted the final hearing. And the matter was heard over a period of 12 days, continuous arguments, and then they have reserved the judgment way back in May, August 2025. The arguments were heard, and they have reserved the judgment. And ultimately, the Supreme Court on 27th May 2026 this year has given this ruling. And you know that Honorable Justice J.V. Parjiwala, who is going to become the Chief Justice of India soon, and R. Mahadevan are the respectable judges who have passed this verdict. So they have upheld the retrospectivity on the actionable claims and ruled that the gaming companies have to honor the demand made by the revenue. So what are the contentions and all that we will be going through? But the background of this issue is this. Next slide, please. There are some of the decisions which are which find mention in the Supreme Court's judgment, which are having a definitely bearing on the final outcome. But I am not going to go into details of these cases and all in order to save on time, because our focus is mainly on how this decision is going to impact the other businesses rather than discussing about the Gamescraft, because I know pretty well the audience are not many from the gaming industry, and they are from other areas also. But once this decision is going to have an impact on their businesses is what is our focus. Hence, we will be concentrating more on that aspect. But a couple of decisions for your information. In the state of Andhra Pradesh versus K. Sachinarayana and others, gaming was held to be an act of gambling on a game of chance, staking where chance is the controlling factor. This definition became nomen juris and was adopted uniformly across the gaming legislation by several high courts. In Dr. K.R. Lakshman versus State of Tamil Nadu, competitions involving substantial or predominant skill were held to be business activities protected under Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution. Wagering or betting on a game of skill is not gambling, since the outcome depends on a substantial degree of skill of the players. This bullet is very important. So the wagering or betting on a game of skill is not gambling, since this outcome depends on a substantial degree of skill of the players. And similarly, tax on competitions where success depends preponderantly on skill falls under entry 6 of list 2 trade activity, not then entry 62 covering betting and gambling. A rummy played with stakes has been judicially permitted and not treated as a gaming or gambling. A game qualifies as one of skill where the better skill prevails more often than not, even if every game carries an element of chance. So these are some of the things that you need to keep it in mind. So skills contests taxes as traded activity and not as a betting or gambling. Next slide, please. Yeah, in M.J. Sivani and others versus the state of Karnataka, the Supreme Court held that playing a game which is preponderantly of skill played with money or stakes amounts to gambling. Applying the predominance test, Karnataka High Court in All India Gaming Federation versus State of Karnataka held that games such as Rummy, whether played online or physically with or without stakes, are games of skills. You can see clearly the difference between the judgment in M.J. Sivani and the All India Gaming Federation here. That is the reason I have given these two next to each other so that you can clearly see the difference. And in light of these decisions, the terms lottery, betting, gambling in entry 6 of the Schedule 3 of the CGST Act 2017 were construed as nomen juris, and taking actionable claims out of purview of supply of goods or services would clearly apply to games of skill. Only games of chance such as lottery, betting, and gambling would be taxable. For your information, what is actionable claim? Just let us touch the basics. Actionable claim is an activity wherein that because of the some action or the agreement that was entered between two individuals on an unknown outcome, when the outcome arises, then who is going to have the say on the outcome or the result? So whether there is going to be any legally enforceable action which can be taken in default of the person's inability to meet the obligation. So if a person fails to do as per the agreement, whether there is a legally enforceable right for the other person, if there exists a legally enforceable right for the other person, then it is considered as an actionable claim. The actionable claim has been defined under the Transfer of Property Act. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, gaming companies paid GST only on the platform fee collected by them, as they did in the earlier service tax regime. But DGCAE issued tax demands on the entire prize pool money collected. As I told you earlier in the example, which I told you that I often will be visiting, four players, each of them contributed 100 rupees, but the platform fee is considered at 10 rupees. So, on 40 rupees total earning by the gaming company, they have discharged the tax, whereas DGCIE has demanded 400 rupees as the total consideration on which the tax needs to be discharged. That is what is the bone of contention between the revenue and the parties. In the resulting litigation, the Karnataka High Court held that GST is not applicable on the games of skill and that there is no difference between offline and online gaming where skill predominates. So the Karnataka High Court, in tune with the earlier rulings of several high courts on the gaming industry, ruled that the games of skill are out of GST purview. So there is no difference if the game is played offline or online. And when skill is the predominant, by holding that predominance test, they held that when skill is the predominant force, then it is going to be out of the GST purview. The court held that entire price pool is not the consideration for supply. Gaming companies were recognized as intermediaries in line with the self-regulatory and TDS regime introduced by NEITY, MIT. And gross gaming revenue, also called gross game win or gross gaming yield, is the total wagered money collected from the players minus the value of all payouts, the difference between how much users bet and how much they win back before taxes, bonuses, or operating expenses. These are some of the words which are used in the gaming industry. For our simple understanding, we can say that gross gaming revenue is going to be 400 rupees, where 40 rupees is going to be the entry fee and 360 rupees is going to be the prize pool amount. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the group of ministers and casinos, racecourses, and online gaming submitted its report on valuation rate of taxation of online gaming in the 47th GST Council meeting. And the GOM relied heavily on the Skill Lotto Solutions Private Limited decision by the Supreme Court and concluded that online gaming involves a supply of actionable claim should be taxed as in the case of lottery, and that uniform rules should apply to race courses, online gaming, betting, and gambling. And in Sunrise Associate, the Supreme Court held that lottery is an actionable claim, deviating from its earlier decision in H. Anraj versus Government of Tamil Nadu. H. Anraj has treated lottery tickets as a dealer's merchandise. The sale of lottery was a transfer of the right to participate in a draw by the state as promoter, amounting to transfer of property, and hence it is liable to sales tax as sale of goods. These are the earlier decisions based on which the Supreme Court has ruled that it is not an actionable claim. But unfortunately, in Skill Lotto, the Supreme Court has taken a different view and they held that a lottery is an actionable claim. And based on these decisions, the group of ministers in their recommendation have held that actionable claims like lottery, betting, gambling, race courses, everything should be classified, grouped together, and they should be treated as an actionable claim, and the taxes should be applied as per the law. So, at the time in 2023, after the receipt of the 47th GST Council group of ministers, the recommendations and all, the law has been substantially clarified. I am using purposefully the word clarified here because though it was an amendment, but ultimately the Supreme Court held that all these amendments made in 2023 are only clarificatory in nature, and hence they have got a retrospective effect also, which we will come to know in the later slides. Next slide, please. So, in the pre-GST regime, actionable claims were categorically excluded from the scope of the term goods for the purpose of levy of sales tax. Under GST, the term goods in section 252 of the CGST Act specifically includes actionable claims. So you can see that GST is merger or subsuming of the earlier taxes. Even sales tax or VAT was subsumed into the GST, but in the sales tax, purposefully under the definition of goods, actionable claims were not included. But in the GST, under section 252 of the CGST Act, if you see, the goods includes actionable claims. But what is actionable claim has not been clarified there, which was done in 2023 amendment. While para 6 schedule 3 of the CGST Act 2017, actionable claims other than lottery, betting and gambling are treated as neither a supply of goods nor a supply of services and are thus not chargeable to the GST. Since the actionable claim of lottery is treated as a supply of goods and excluded from Schedule 3, it became chargeable to the GST with valuation for such supply provided under Rule 31. This Rule 31 is also in introduction during 2023. So pre-GST, actionable claims are excluded from goods definition for sales tax purposes, but GST goods definition has included the actionable claims, and actionable claims other than lottery, betting and gambling are neither goods nor services as per para 6 of the schedule 3, but the valuation is for GST, the valuation section happens to be section 15, but in section 31, it has been further elaborated that how on an actionable claims the valuation mechanism applies. This is courtesy amendment made in 2023. Next slide, please. In the state of Rajasthan versus Rajasthan Chemists Association, the Supreme Court held that where the subject of tax is the sale, the measure of tax for quantification must retain nexus with the sale. Tax on sale of goods is substantially a tax on the sale price, and vendor or buyer cannot be taxed divorce the subject of tax. This is also a very important decision by the Supreme Court in analyzing this particular case law. The measure to which the tax rate is applied must have a nexus to the taxable event of sale and cannot be divorced from it. So every transaction of sale is independent and can be subjected to the levy, and the components and measure making the levy effective must have nexus to the taxable event. And the Union of India versus Intercontinental Consultants and Technocrats Private Limited 2018 service tax matter, the Supreme Court held that valuation of a taxable service cannot be anything more or less than the consideration paid as quid pro quo for rendering that service. Why we are connecting to these decisions? In the intercontinental decision, when they said that if there are any kind of incidental payments which were collected as part of the service consideration for meeting those obligations, those should not be included for the levy of service tax. So, if there are any incidental expenses which were made known to the party for rendering the services, will not form part of the taxable pool. That was the decision which was upheld even by the Supreme Court also in the matter of intercontinental. All these decisions were kept aside on moral grounds while pronouncing this decision that we can simply conclude on the Gameskraft matter, which we will see in the next slides. Next slide, please. Yeah. So for classification purposes, notification 72 of 23 customs non-tariff dated 20th October 23 introduced a customs tariff classification for specified actionable claims under heading 9806 of the first schedule to the Customs Tariff Act 1975, and this tariff applies for classification of goods under GST law. You know it, the GST law has completely accepted the customs tariff. So, as per the customs tariff, whatever is the classification, that equally holds good in the GST also. So, in the customs tariff, 9806, the HSM is particularly for actionable claims. Accordingly, lottery, betting, gambling, casinos, and online money gaming are classified as actionable claims for tariff and the GST classification purposes, providing statutory support to their special treatment as goods under the GST framework. So GST at 28% was prescribed through the amending notification 11 of 23 CTR dated 29/9/23 to goods notification 11 of 2017 effective from 1st of October 23, and the rate was increased to 40% as per schedule 3 of notification 9/25 dated 17/9/25 with effect from 22/9/25. These are the legislative changes as far as the tax rate are concerned. Just for your record that I am giving all these data. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what are the arguments made by the gaming companies on the revenue? First, the gaming companies. The common factor in betting, gambling, wagering, and gaming is chance, distinct from activities where skill constitutes the predominant element. Winning or losing depends on the skill of the player, and the same cannot be altered by stake. So this is the argument made by all the gaming companies. You see, the best of the tax advocates in India, every single name has represented in this matter before the Supreme Court. Void agreements fall outside the ambit of actionable claim. Actionable claims belong to a different category of juristic property rights. Online gaming companies merely rendered platform services as intermediaries. Any tax levied on betting and gambling is understood as a tax on the activity and not on goods. And the levy rests on a completely artificial valuation, and it is higher than the entire online gaming sector's revenue. And Rule 31A3 is violative of Section 15 as it imposes GST not on the actual consideration but on the gross stakes. So these are the contentions put forth by the parties. So what they have said, skill versus gambling. Chance is the common thread in betting and gambling. Skill predominant games are skill-based games are predominantly based on the skill and they are distinct. And platforms are mere intermediaries only. And the stake pool is not the operator's consideration, even as per the accounting standards. And for deduction of the TDS, the entire money was never considered. And the demand exceeds the revenue, because what is the revenue? As the example that we have set forth for this webinar, 4 players, each contributing 100 rupees. The income for the gaming platform is going to be 40 rupees only. But the tax is levied on 400 rupees. So the demand is exceeding the revenue of the entire online gaming sector, and GST was imposed on gross stakes, not on the actual consideration under Rule 31A3, and it draws strength from Section 15 only. Next slide, please. So, what are the counter arguments given by the revenue? Any activity involving stakes constitutes gambling, regardless of whether the underlying game is skill-based or chance-based. This is the one sweeping proposal by the revenue, which was accepted by the Supreme Court, that the minute stakes are involved in a game, it is going to be taxable, and it amounts to gambling. Then the operator of any game, including a skill-based game, supplies an actionable claim in the form of chance to win when stakes are involved, as money is movable property and winning pool constitutes the movable property. So the second important point the revenue argued is, even in the case of a skill-based game, but if there is a stakes which are involved, then the money is going to be a movable property. So the winning pool constitutes the movable property, and it partakes the form of actionable claim. So every player has a vested right to claim the winning amount, and the pool is under the control of the operator. And the contract between the player and the gaming company is not a wagering contract. It is valid and enforceable, and the player can lawfully recover the amount won. So the legality to the actionable claim has been proposed through this bullet. So the concept of supply and the GST is broad, and it is an all-inclusive and cannot be restricted to the traditionally recognized concepts of transfer and sale. So they said that the margin which the online gaming companies are retaining is only the consideration has been conclusively replied by the revenue by this bullet. And the taxable event is the supply of the actionable claim by the gaming company and not betting and gambling itself. So they did not go into whether it is a betting or a gambling, but what they are saying that the gaming companies are rendering the services of supply of actionable claim. And the entire stake is the consideration and forms the transaction value. Under Section 15.1, Rule 31A is only a reiteration of Section 15.1 of the GST Act. So the rule is drawing its strength from the Act that was emphasized in this particular bullet. Next slide, please. The matter was heard and elaborately discussed in the 471 pages decision by the Supreme Court. And the important points are only being highlighted here for the sake of time. The essential element of betting and gambling lies in staking money or money's worth upon uncertain outcomes. The character does not depend exclusively on whether the underlying activity is a game of skill or a game of chance. So this is where the actionable claim definition has been justified. Even where the activity involves substantial elements of skill, once a participation is conditioned upon staking on certain uncertain outcomes, the transaction acquires the character of betting and gambling under the GST legislation. Online gaming activities, including fantasy sports or other digital games involving staking upon uncertain outcomes, constitutes betting and gambling for the GST purposes. And the CGST Act and the corresponding state enactments validly subject actionable claims arising from betting and gambling to the GST. Section 231, 252, 7, 9, 15 are constitutionally valid and clearly traceable to Article 246A of the Constitution of India. And the levy is upon the taxable supply of actionable claims, not upon the activity of betting or gambling simpliciter. Next slide, please. The levy does not transgress Article 366.12 or 366.12A. Article 366.12A merely furnishes the constitutional meaning of goods and services tax. It does not exhaustively define taxable supply, valuation, or the treatment of specific transactions which fall within Article 246A. The inclusion of actionable claims within goods under Section 252 and the levy under Section 9(1) do not violate the constitutional GST scheme. The challenge to their validity is rejected. The challenge found under Article 14, 19(1)(g), 21, 265 also states the statutory framework bears a clear nexus with the taxable event, the supply of actionable claims arising from betting and gambling transactions. Mere commercial hardship, reduction in profitability, or increased tax incidence cannot by itself render a fiscal measure unconstitutional. Article 21 has no application in the fiscal context. The levy is supported by statutory authority traceable to Section 7, 9, and 15, read with Schedule 3 and the rules satisfying Article 265. Next slide, please. Rule 31, 31A, 31B, C cannot be independently invalidated merely by reiterating the constitutional challenge directed against the parent levy. No infirmity warrants interference in judicial review. Supply under Section 7 is not confined to transfer of pre-existing actionable claims. It extends to organized betting and gambling arrangements within which actionable claims interests arise. Participants acquire contingent beneficial interest in movable property upon participation. These constitute actionable claims under Section 3 of the Transfer of Property Act and fall within taxable framework. The amounts staked are appropriated towards the participation in gameplay constitutes consideration under Section 231. There is no statutory basis for excluding or deducting prize pools, winnings, or payouts while determining the taxable value. The statutory measure for valuation is validly embodied in Section 15, read with the applicable valuation rules. These are all the actual words from the Supreme Court judgment. Hence, I am not elaborating anything because It is the conclusion of 471 pages of the judgment. Next slide, please. And Rule 31 is intra-vires the CGST Act, a valid machinery provision operationalizing the valuation framework in section 9 and 15, read with entry 6 of Schedule 3. It neither creates a fresh levy nor enlarges the charging provisions. The valuation mechanism in Rule 31 is not manifestly arbitrary or violative of Article 14. Fiscal and economic legislation permits greater legislative flexibility in matters of valuation and measure of levy. Rule 31 bears a direct nexus with the nature of organized betting and gambling transactions and constitutes a valid exercise of delegated legislation. The 2023 amendments, including the amendments to entry 6 of Schedule 3, insertion of rules 31B and C, are clarificatory and explanatory in nature and consequently retrospective in operation. They neither create a fresh levy nor introduce a new taxable event. They provide greater statutory specificity and operational clarity. Rules 31B and C are valid machinery and valuation provisions for online gaming and casino transactions, respectively. Next slide, please. So, online gaming activities involving pooled stakes give rise to actionable claim interest, constituting taxable supplies within Section 7. It is a very conclusive judgment. Online gaming operators are not mere intermediaries facilitating transaction between participants. They are themselves the suppliers of such actionable claim. The taxable supply comes into existence upon placement and appropriation of stake amounts towards the gameplay. Entirely a different conclusion from the past understanding and the judgments in place. Valuation of online gaming and fantasy sports is governed by Rule 31B, including for pending show cause notices, adjudication proceedings, and demands, given the clarificatory and retrospective 2023 amendments. The principles apply equally to fantasy sports and analogous formats. So, this decision has got a retrospective effect, which is giving statutory effect to the 2023 amendments being retrospective in nature. For casino transactions, recourse to Rule 31, reconstruction methodologies and best judgment assessment is not impermissible, where SSEs fail to maintain complete and reliable contemporaneous records. This is a very important thing. When the SSE fail to maintain complete and reliable contemporaneous records, the Supreme Court itself is supporting the view that best judgment assessments are not impermissible. See, when we are discussing this entire subject, not from the point of view of the gaming industry, but what it is going to, how it is going to impact we, the other business persons, this is a very important line that we need to understand. If you are not able to maintain a complete and reliable contemporaneous records, the best judgment assessment is not impermissible as per Supreme Court. However, the actual determination and computation of taxable value must align with Rule 31C. The correctness of computations, assumptions, and proportional allocations remains open before the adjudicating authority. So, based on your strength of your documents, the meticulous manner in which you are maintaining your records is going to be the key for the final assessments. Next slide, please. So, what the constitutional and statutory challenges mounted against the levy of GST on actionable claims arising from betting and gambling transactions are rejected. The impugned provisions of CGST Act, the corresponding state enactments, and the rules framed thereunder, including rules 31A, 31B, and 31C, together with the notifications, circulars, and executive instruments issued in furtherance thereof, are upheld as constitutionally and statutorily valid. Pending show cause notices, education proceedings, and consequential demands relating to online gaming, fantasy sports, casino transactions shall be considered and decided in accordance with the valuation framework embodied in Rule 31B and C as applicable and the principles laid down in the judgment. So this is the conclusion of the Supreme Court decision. Next slide, please. And the levy of GST on actionable claims arising from betting and gambling transactions is constitutionally valid within the legislative competence conferred by Article 246A and consistent with the statutory framework of the GST Act and the corresponding state GST enactment. The challenge to the constitutional and statutory validity of sections 231, 252, 7, 9, 15 and the corresponding state provisions, rules 31AB of the CGST rules, together with the notifications and circulars and executive instruments issued in furtherance thereof, falls and is rejected, fails and it is rejected. The amendments introduced by the CGST Act in 2023, including the amendments to Entry 6 Schedule 3 and the insertion of 31BC, are clarificatory and explanatory in nature and operate retrospectively. Next slide, please. So, organized and online gaming activities, including fantasy sports and analogous gaming formats involving pool stakes, give rise to actionable claims supplies accessible to GST under the statutory framework governing betting and gambling transactions. And for casino transactions, recourse to Rule 31 and adoption of best judgment methodologies under the pre-amendment framework cannot be said to be impermissible in the absence of complete and reliable contemporaneous records. And the ultimate determination and computation of taxable value for casinos shall stand governed by Rule 31C in accordance with the principle laid down in the judgment, and all pending show cause notices are to be disposed of as per this judgment. Next slide, please. So, this is the judgment. I think that there are some repetitions also, which is there in the Supreme Court decision, while emphasizing the point that they have repeated certain observations. So ultimately, the court ruled that platforms facilitating monetized participation are not mere intermediaries, but suppliers of actionable claims. So this particular sentence itself is very hard to digest in view of the self-assessment based TDS regime or the mighty proposed changes to the direct tax laws, and also the current accounting practice being observed in the gaming industry. So this shifts the tax burden across the broader digital economy, making tech platforms, fintech aggregators, digital escrow services vulnerable to similar taxation on aggregate transaction valuation rather than just service fee. In this context, we have to refer to the intercontinental decision, wherein I have given that example. If there happens to be any kind of an incidental expenditure and it was also collected by the service provider along with his service fee, then the intercontinental decision very clearly told that only the service fee should be subjected to the service tax, but not the repayment of the incidental expenditure. However, this decision is a deviation from such a kind of an understanding, which is going to sound alarm bells for all those working in the digital economy, tech platforms, fintech aggregators, and digital escrow service providers. And the Supreme Court has upheld retrospective legislation, sending a stern message to the startups, edtech, and e-commerce sectors, indicating that governments can legally enforce retroactive tax liabilities without constitutional objections. This is also as a kind of the pink papers are reporting this kind of possibility is also there. So all those who are working in the new startups, edtech companies, e-commerce sectors, all this, they should be aware that the government can come out with a tax levy and they can justify the retrospective legislations without any kind of a constitutional objection, because the Supreme Court is also towing the line of revenue by giving a constitutional justification for the tax levies. The decision establishes that once the financial stakes are involved in an uncertain outcome, the distinction between game of skill and game of chance is irrelevant to the levy of GST. This weakens the legal protection given to the skill-based business models operating in the digital realm, such as skill-based esports tournaments, prediction markets, and localized community contests with entry fee. So, all these sectors are also going to have an impact because the tax levy may be on the total amount. Because when actionable claim definition is going to be justified by your activity, then we cannot rule out the possibility. So this is something which the people are expecting, that it can extend to cover these sectors also. But how it is going to happen, that we got to see, because very clearly one thing I can say, that the online gaming industry is having an issue with the department. Hence, the government has clarified it in so many terms by introducing the Rule 31B and 31C. But the valuation methodology under Rule Section 15 did not undergo any kind of a change to give such a kind of a reading for all and every sector. But if there is any kind of a possibility, by relying on this particular Supreme Court decision, the courts may come to such a conclusion. But how far it is going to happen in the real time scenario, that is something that we need to wait and watch. Next slide, please. So, what are the emerging complications other than the tax? The insolvency proceedings that are likely to follow will raise their own set of unresolved legal questions, including the priority treatment of government's GST claim relative to the secured creditors under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Why this is? Because the total revenue estimated from this particular decision is roughly 2.5 lakh crores for all these years. And there is no chance that the gaming companies, any gaming company for that matter, has factored for this much of a tax in their books, nor their statutory auditors have recognized this as something that the companies have to pay in the future. Hence, they did not keep so much of a reserves. Hence, definitely IBC proceedings are going to be initiated in all these matters. So, in IBC proceedings also, whether the GST has really got a higher stake to claim their share is going to be a big decision. So, where large retrospective demands push a business towards insolvency, how the government's GST claim ranks against the secured creditors is still an open question. So the courts are taking different views, and GST is not getting the precedence which the law said. The obligations of insolvency professionals with respect to the vast depositories of user data held by these platforms under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023 is under cloud. See, this is another point, that all these gaming companies are having huge volumes of users' personal data. When they have registered on these platforms, they must be submitting several of their personal information. So how it is going to be put to use is another big question. The platforms hold large volumes of user data. So what happens to the data? Who is going to be responsible for it? Are also the questions apart from the tax. Next slide, please. So there is no clarity on taxation of poker as a game of skill or a chance, and the state powers to rule gaming business. One thing certainly we can say, but if stakes are involved in a poker game, definitely that it will fall squarely into this decision. So the consequences follow. And there is a possibility to consider Section 11A, newly introduced by Finance Act 2024, waiver for the tax demands consequent to this decision, which held the tax levy to be retrospective. So this section 11A is one amendment which was made in 2024 post the amendments made to the gaming sector in 2023, wherein the act gives the powers to the central government on the recommendations of the GST Council to waive off the past GST liabilities for the industry for a particular period if it is satisfied that non-payment or underpayment of taxes was due to a generally prevalent trade practice. So Section 11A overrides all other standard recovery demand penalty provisions in the GST law. And to invoke this section, GST Council must be satisfied that a specific tax shortfall or non-payment occurred because of a widely accepted prevalent trade practice across a sector rather than deliberate evasion by an individual firm. So it should be in a broader perspective, but it has to pass the test of the GST Council, because you know it, in the GST Council, for any decision to come to be legislated, that there should be an unanimity. So far, Any of the decisions by the GST Council were all with uniformity only. They have never put to voting, and they never gone by the majority view. Hence, all states have to agree. So, in this, what happens? The 2.5 lakh crore, which is at stake, when you take state-wise, then there may be states which will be big time losers. So, if the council decides to waive off this levy under Section 11A, then the states may state their claims saying that they need some kind of a compensation from the central government. So, how the center is going to accommodate this request is going to be another big question that we got to wait and watch. And the Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act of 2025 has imposed a ban on real money gaming in India. And now this matter is also under dispute before the Supreme Court. This is one other point. Next slide, please. So no new real money gamings are going to come into existence. And a couple of other issues for your purview that I'm going to put forth before you go into the Q&A, because I did not see any Q&A coming here in the chat box. Some of the other points are that all the past decisions by the several high courts were put aside, and the Supreme Court has come with a new way to look at the whole issue. And simply only one point that when there are stakes involved, then there is no wafer thin line difference between a game of chance or a game of skill. That's how the entire levy has been justified on moral grounds, because prior to this decision, the same bench has ruled in the matter of Jengli that the online the betting in online gaming can be regulated by the states. The earlier judgment by the same bench on the same day is in the matter of Jingli, in that they said that the state has got powers. So, if you see the pattern of judgments from the Supreme Court of late, that it clearly sends out a signal that revenue in pursuit of their tax demands can bring in justification by way of constitutional amendments, and they can ask the courts also to read these constitutional amendments to have retrospective effect to justify their levy. So this is a very clear message that industry should understand, and they have to play very cautiously. And whenever they are in doubt, it is better to seek clarity rather than going ahead with the transactions and ending up with a problem of this magnitude in this particular case. That is the reason we thought that this is going to be an appropriate topic for us to discuss in detail, and that's how we have taken it. So why this is important? As I told you, the financial services, fintech actionable claims taxability is going to be a problem, because that the legal definitions all will be covering towards the actionable claims. All payment gateways will also have a huge risk. Digital marketplaces, e-commerce platforms also will be under the scanner, because that how their activities are going to be considered as actionable claims, and they being intermediaries as per the current understanding may change by their activities. Hence, when you are planning anything new, then you have to check in light of this decision whether you are going to be impacted by this particular judgment, being a digital facilitator or hospitality events and ticketing retrospective liabilities, and the valuation methodologies are going to be questioned, and the software as a service providers, digital service providers, gambling platform operators, all these sectors are also going to have an issue, because the amount that they collect towards the various activities should not take the color of an actionable claim in order to attract the contours of this particular judgment and end up on with issues. So, with these words, I conclude my presentation and I open the floor for the discussions. If there are any questions, if the participants wants to directly pose also, Mr. Manoj can unmute them and we can discuss, because that I did not see any Q&A in the box or in the chat. I think all the participants were not very keen in having a discussion, rather than they heard a monotonous speech by me.
Guys, do you have any questions? Please raise your hand so you can talk. Anyone?
I think everybody is hesitant.
Uh,
There can be only two scenarios: either nobody has understood, or uh, everybody found that it is not very much material for them. Which way that I should take this? If not on the topic, on any other GST issue also, if you have got any kind of a problems, we can discuss, because that we have got a couple of minutes to go. Of course, we have exceeded our time. If there is nothing, then I really thank all of you participation in this, because that this is a Friday evening. I know it that you are all heading for a weekend, and during that time that you are kind enough to take your time off to listen to me. Thank you very much. And thanks for the Wepsol to provide me this platform also. And time and again, I am just indicating in this decision also, again, the Supreme Court has emphasized that you need to maintain meticulous records and prove at the time of audit that your transactions are trustworthy, to not to levy the best judgment assessment. That is where that the software solution providers are going to come to your rescue, like Wepsol, wherein that you can take advantage of their platforms and their services in order to maintain your books in a neat way. Whenever the audit or assessments are called for, that you can present them in a minute manner, so that all aspects of the transaction are visible to the revenue and as well as to you also. Hence, you will not be ending up with any kind of a surprise at a later date. So that is the whole emphasis on they are discussing this much today in this session. So I think the message is clear and loud for everybody. And thanks for your time. That I am signing off.
Akila sir,
Yes, sir.
thank you so much for your time and presentation. We
Thank
hope
you.
everyone enjoyed. So, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.